So, RWBY. I don't like it.
Each history's greatest monster!
So let's get this lynching started, shall we? I'm no stranger to being part of a fandom. I've been part of quite a few fandoms in my short time here on this blue marble, and I'm well acquainted with dealing with some of the craziest of certain fandoms.
But that's just a theory! No, shh, he is legend.
But look, you and I both know where this is going. I'm gonna make a video talking about my complaints about a popular show that has a dedicated fan base, and half of said fan base will more than likely want to string up my bony booty, while the other half will question why the hell I'm even using a cartoon skeleton griffon to convey my points. But enough of me prolonging this eventual headache and hangover, let's talk about RWBY! Oh, and spoiler warning, I guess. So, one of the things I do want to start off is saying something actually positive about the show.
Get off the stage!
I do have to admit, RWBY does look good on the surface level. I mean, it was a lot more rough around the edges in the earlier seasons, with the visual continuities on the rise. Oh look, RWBY has two of her iconic weapons. Characters all of a sudden
Going ghost!
clipping that leaves some...
Girl, that's creepy!
Wait, am I even allowed to show that on YouTube? And apparently everyone has the ability to teleport! Wait, this started off as me saying something positive, right? I mean, you've read the title of the video. Don't get me wrong, the issues aren't as bad as they were in the earlier seasons, but they are still there. But they aren't as prevalent, and you really have to look for them most of the time. There are plenty of people who tend to find these sorts of things, and maybe I'm just missing out on most of these mistakes. But you know what also is missing? The oppression!
Help! Help! I'm being repressed!
One of the major plot points that's been going on through the entirety of the show involves the whole faunus being oppressed. If you don't know what a faunus is, one, why are you watching a video about RWBY? And two, they're essentially diet furries.
What? Oh no! Oh, that's there you are, pretty bunny thing!
Throughout the series, we're told information and given the vibe that the viewers are meant to sympathize with the faunus. Heck, in one of the commentaries on the DVD tracks, the cast and crew say that it's a parallel to the civil rights movement. But throughout the show, we don't really see the oppression. We're told about it. Unfortunately, we're in a medium where it's show don't tell, a visual medium. You can tell me all the time these people are oppressed, but I don't see it in the 5 seasons. And it's a major plot point, apparently. I know you're going to point towards characters like Weiss, and that one bully who was pulling on Velvet Ears, Cardin. I'm not saying there isn't racism in the show, although the bully Cardin comes off as more of being a jackass to me. I mean, he bullies Jean, too.
What? No, wait, get me out of here. Please, don't. Oh, come on!
And I could easily say that it's just because the character is racist that isn't indicative of the whole society of being so. Any legal discrimination or segregation. It's just a character being an idiot and racist. We're just given exposition about this. Then again, Miles and Carrie have gone on record saying they need to work on their show don't tell aspect, and even then we're told that the faunus are second-class citizens, but I don't see it. In fact, from what I've seen, it's actually shown to be the opposite.
It means as soon as I can convince the rest of the council that I need huntsmen more than they do.
Is he gone?
I've heard some people say that Vale is more open-minded about this, even though we've got this scene.
Why do you wear that bow, Blake? Why hide who you are?
You may be willing to accept the faunus, Professor Ozpin, but your species is not.
True. But we are continuing to take strides to lessen the divide.
And once again, we're only told about this oppression, and it's something that could have easily been rectified, like with a flashback in the show. Hell, Neon from Atlas Academy is open about her being a faunus in a tournament that is being broadcasted.
Look! Now you're bottom heavy!
Help! Help! I'm being repressed!
And take Elia, for example, someone who we're told was also an Atlas and tried to get into a prep school to get into the Atlas Academy. So did Neon have to go through similar treatment? But if that were the case, then... My issue is that we're told of the oppression but not shown it. You try to make the White Fang sympathetic, or hell, the entire Faunus people sympathetic, but this has failed. Hell, apparently Sung Wukong's got fans in the canon, or his abs do. Wait, is that objectification, or... Honestly, I'm tired of being told about this. Show me the oppression! Speaking of showing, let's look at the bads of the show.
Let's see, what does this button do?
So, about the Grimm.
Warning! Bullshitter alert!
Yeah, they suck. From an aesthetic style, I actually enjoy the Grimm's design, but they really don't pose much of a threat to the characters. I understand they're pretty much the mooks of the series, but really, if you portray these monsters as being so easy to beat, it just raises too many questions and baffles me how anyone could lose to a Grimm who has any sort of training whatsoever. But isn't that polite of the mindless beasts letting Yang and Blake enjoy their conversation and the madness that's going on?
It's really interesting to me that Royce and Yang are kind of just like standing there talking while all these Grimm are
Just
running everywhere.
You can talk about how Vale was destroyed by the Grimm, however there were other factors that came into that besides just the Grimm. We had robots going rogue, we had the bad guys making their move. It wasn't just the Grimm that caused the destruction of Vale. Like, when it comes to monsters, I don't like the Grimm as they're being portrayed. Now, you can point to Torchwick was eaten, or when Ren's village was attacked by the Grimm, and I'd counter that's due to the people's incompetence. And it's supposedly made up of rich people and huntsmen are hired guns, so why wouldn't you hire a few huntsmen to live in your town?
We need a huntsman.
As for Torchwick, well, he was busy giving RWBY a speech.
As for me, I'll do what I do best. Lie, steal, cheat, and survive!
That's kind of the folly of the villain in that matter. It's kind of become a trope. You know what's an actual monster that's dangerous? Well, if you've never seen it, there's a show called Kamen Rider Gaim where we had monsters called the Invest. Monsters that are numerous in number can withstand normal attacks, and even a scratch from them can infect you and turn you into one of them. And to make matters worse, these things evolve. You can already see there are quite a few traits that they share with the Grimm. However, as I just said, the Invests are actually portrayed more competently, even though they're supposed to be mindless beasts as well. That's how you make the monsters more intimidating and actually able to be a threat to the characters, and it adds tension to scenes. Oh, and the Invest dance. Speaking of that, the villains are... gonna be honest again, I don't like the villains. And this can be seen in Cinder's character. We've been seeing her express wanting to get revenge on Ruby Rose.
He has the students with him. He has RWBY.
He certainly does.
She wants to know, what about the girl?
Is the girl with him?
But with all that build-up, and when the two are finally in the same room, Cinder chooses to fight Jean of all people. Wait, what? Oh, and when Cinder decides to make Jean feel horrible by targeting one of his friends, she goes after Weiss, even though Ruby's right behind her, face first on the ground. Shoot her! Stab her! Kill her!
You're kind of an idiot.
This is the girl who messed up your face! Why aren't you doing anything?
Okay, they're nuts.
That's a bad sign. But really, the villains aren't really all that compelling. And hell, Salem is kinda... well, generic and lackluster. That might be due to the fact that we haven't really seen her do anything, really. Now, I'm sure you can point to a lot of villains that I like personally and pretty much say the same thing about them. I mean, let's take an example of one of my favorite villains who has a similar role to that of Salem. Lord Zedd.
You have made me very angry!
Lord Zedd pretty much was the same. He just sat around and had his minions do most of his work. However, unlike Salem, Lord Zedd was actually a lot more hands-on. He was able to effectively eliminate the Power Rangers' greatest asset, the Zords. He's an Emperor of Darkness and shouldn't have to sully his hands with the grunt work, but he showed that he was capable of being a threat if he wanted to be a bit more hands-on. We don't really have a scene like that with Salem. Yes, we've seen her control the Grimm to some capacity. However, if you follow my reasoning and why I already explained why the Grimm aren't that impressive, you'd have to agree that I don't really think it works that well. I do admit that I might be a bit unfair here since I'm comparing Salem with a well more established villain, but that's the thing. We don't really see her do anything of any actual note worth that makes me consider to be an actual threat. And hey, maybe that's on me, but I never said that I was giving an objective analysis here. I do have my own personal biases and tastes, and while I do try to keep them out of these sorts of videos, they are there. Oh, but what I can't say without remorse is that Salem's design sucks. Get that off your head! At least to me, I find her kind of lackluster in design, which I say is a bad thing since if there's one thing I can say, most of the cast has some really good design and characters. In fact, one of the things I can say positive about RWBY is that I do like how they managed to handle their characters somewhat in a competent manner. Take Yang in Volume 4, where they did a good job of showcasing her dealing with depression and how she overcame it with her and her fears. It's a shame that most of the other characters don't really get all that much attention to detail into their characters, or it's just head scratching. For this, let's look at Ruby Road. Let's me say in Volume 5 we see Ruby learning how to fight without her weapon, because that's been an established character trait throughout the series.
Ruby ain't all that when she doesn't have her weapon.
Yeah, that was one of the very first things, right?
Yeah, it was one of the rules that we set up for her back before we wrote Volume 1.
And the fact she's trying to improve upon that weakness is something that I do consider to be good character development. Trying to grow a person and overcome your weaknesses is something good. And even then, she's not a master of it, which is a pitfall that a lot of stories like to fall into. Now, why is this a problem? Well, this goes all the way back to the first episode.
Ruby ain't all that when she doesn't have her weapon. Ruby ain't all that when she doesn't have her weapon.
Magnificent bastard, I read your book!
How did she send this thug flying? And this kind of ties into another issue I have with RWBY, the continuity. There have been a few times where the continuity has kind of gone a black eye because of all this.
They also don't do a good job of convincing you that all characters exist at all times. Characters seem to be removed from existence for long periods of time, contributing nothing to the fight and not showing up on screen. Hell, one time they actually forgot to include characters in the frame because they weren't the focus of the scene.
One of the biggest issues that's plagued the show for a long time, and slowly is getting better, but is still an issue, is that there are too many characters to focus on. There's nothing wrong with a large cast of characters, but not all the characters need to be given as much development as each other. There's a reason like there are terms like main characters, secondary characters, side characters, stock characters, blah 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 blah. This is evident in the third volume where we kept getting a lot of characters. Characters aren't in the last two volumes, so any of them that we've given is kind of moot. Oh, and speaking of Volume 3, I hate Volume 3.
You have made me very angry!
And that's mostly due to the tournament arc, and if you've been on my channel for a while, you'd have seen my video on My Hero Academia, where I explain why I don't like tournament arcs. But if you don't want to deal with me more than you have to, my issues with tournament arcs are that they tend to not have any use of good background and settings in the fights. Said fights turn to flinging attacks at each other with no real strategy, and it gets annoying with one-on-one fights being most of the action. Now, once again, I know what you're thinking.
With science, of course!
Because you're going to be saying that my two complaints don't really apply. And you're right. However, I said those are my complaints for tournament arcs in general. My complaints with the tournament arc in RWBY are things such as not knowing battle tactics.
3, 2, 1, begin! Neptune! What are you doing?
Oh, you know, just gaining higher ground on the enemy's side.
Even though you've got the markings of a pincer attack, with Neptune being on higher ground with a long-range weapon, to being completely stupid.
Okay, fine. Just get out of the water.
And these issues are in the volume all over the place. And I'd even say the same thing in Volume 5, especially with the last group fight. Are you an idiot? All in all, this series has its pros and it has its cons. If you like the show and get past these sorts of flaws, then more power to you. I'm not trying to take that away from you. And hey, as I've alluded to, I have been watching the show, but I shouldn't bother to have to turn off my brain to enjoy it, especially when the writers are trying to make a complex story about it, where they force you to think. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. I'm Skullcommon, and remember to examine your fandom.